The metal corridor was quiet when arrived, carrying a small repair kit and a tired expression on his face. He had worked 3 shifts in a row, and all he wanted was a warm meal and a bed. But the commander had ordered him to check the newly secured prisoner first. "Make sure the cell barrier is stable," the officer said. "She's dangerous. Don't go too close." Expected some wild creature, a hostile beast with claws, or maybe one of those armored alien warriors everyone feared. Instead, when he stepped into the dim holding sector, he froze. Inside the cell stood a woman. Tall, injured, and wrapped in dim blue restraints, she leaned against the wall with heavy breaths. Her skin held a faint silver glow under the lights. Her hair, long and braided, draped over her shoulder like dark liquid metal. Her eyes, sharp and alert, followed the moment he entered. They were not the eyes of a monster. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much pain. The captured alien officer had lost everything in the last battle, her unit, her ship, and the freedom she once guarded with pride. She stood rigid as if gravity itself was punishing her. In her world, being captured was worse than death. Being taken by humans, the cruel species, was a fate taught to children as a nightmare. And now, in front of her, stood one of those nightmares. Swallowed nervously but kept his distance. He clicked on a scanner device, pretending he didn't feel her gaze burning through him. He wasn't trained to deal with prisoners, especially not ones taller and stronger than him. But there was something in her expression, tired but still fierce, that made him step slowly instead of running out. The silence stretched between them like a tense thread. Finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "Will you torture me now?" Blinked, "What? No." Her brow tightened. "Then what do you want?" "I'm just here to check the barrier," he said, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Nothing else." Didn't believe him. Her people taught that humans pretended to show mercy before striking. They were emotionless animals, creatures of instinct, not compassion. Yet the human in front of her looked, unsure, almost gentle. Approached the control panel. His fingers shook slightly as he worked. He glanced at her only once, and even that made his heart stutter. Not because she was alien, but because she looked so exhausted, bruised, cold. She looked like someone who needed help, but refused to ask for it. He lowered his voice. "Are you hurt?" Stiffened as if the words were a trap. "Why do you ask?" "Because you're shaking," he said softly. Her breath caught. She hadn't noticed her own trembling. She tried to force her body to stand tall again, to appear unbroken. But she couldn't stop the cold running through her limbs. Her species handled heat far better than freezing human temperatures. The human saw it. Without thinking twice, took a small thermal blanket from his toolkit. He placed it gently on the floor near the barrier slot and pushed it inside. Stared at it like it was a trick. "For warmth," he said. "You don't have to take it if you don't want." She approached slowly, her steps cautious. When she lifted the blanket, the heat surprised her. Humans created such comforting technology. For all her life, she believed they only made weapons. Her throat tightened, and she hated how unfamiliar the feeling was. "Why give this to me?" she whispered. "You looked cold," answered simply. No lies, no threats, just a plain truth that trembled in the air between them. Turned her face away, hiding the sting in her eyes. She had survived battles, fire, and loss, but kindness from a human felt like the strangest wound of all. And as walked out of the holding sector, he didn't know that his small act of mercy had already begun to break the chains of fear she carried. The hum of the ship's engines filled the corridor as returned to the holding sector the next day. He had tried to focus on repairs, on maintenance schedules, on anything but the silver-eyed alien who haunted his thoughts. Yet something about her refused to leave his mind. He didn't know why. He wasn't supposed to care. Prisoners were prisoners. Dangerous prisoners at that. But curiosity tugged at him stronger than duty. Sat in the cell, legs folded beneath her, staring at the floor. The blanket he had given her yesterday was wrapped around her shoulders. She hadn't spoken since he left, and her eyes were fixed on some invisible point. The stillness in her posture was not resignation, it was vigilance. Every human soldier she had ever seen would kill or intimidate. Every human she had heard about in stories was cruel. And yet the one in front of her didn't look like any human she had feared. He looked uncertain. "Good morning," said softly, leaning against the wall outside her cell. Flinched at the sound. Do you speak to all the prisoners this way? She asked cautiously. No, he admitted, keeping his hands visible. Only the ones who look like they need someone to talk to. She lifted her gaze sharply. And what makes me different? Shrugged. I don't know, something in your eyes. You look like you fought too many battles and maybe lost some. Her chest tightened. No one had ever read her like that. Not commanders, not soldiers, not even her sister before the war. She wanted to look away, to pretend it meant nothing, but the warmth in his voice made her stomach twist. Do you care about the ones you fix? She asked quietly. His hands froze over the control panel. I care about people, yes, he said carefully, even if they're supposed to be my enemy. His heart skipped. His words were simple, almost too ordinary for how deep they struck her. She looked at him fully for the first time, noting the faint dirt on his uniform, the tired lines on his face, and the softness in his eyes that no human commander would ever allow. Why, she whispered. Because it's right, he replied. Because anyone left to suffer alone deserves help, even if it's complicated. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to ask more, but the words stuck in her throat. Compassion was foreign to her species, and yet here it was, tangible and real. She didn't know if she should be afraid or grateful. Noticed the hesitation and smiled faintly, trying to make the moment lighter. Do you want some water? He asked, holding a small container. Hesitated, then nodded. He poured it into a metallic cup and slid it through the slot. Her fingers brushed the metal, then the cup, then his hand, just slightly before she recoiled. The contact was electric and terrifying in its simplicity. Humans touched others differently than aliens, softer, more careful. Thank you, she murmured, almost inaudibly. You're welcome, he said, and that was all, but something unspoken passed between them. Something neither understood fully, but both recognized. The alarms suddenly beeped, just a small test from the ship's systems, but the moment shattered the fragile connection. Flinched, expecting punishment, instinctively put his hand over hers, steadying her. It's okay, nothing happened. Her silver eyes shimmered with a new feeling, trust, a dangerous, fragile trust. She had never given it before. She had survived war by relying on her instincts, her strength, and her cunning. But now she realized she had another choice. Someone else could hold a part of her, if only for a moment. The rest of the day passed in silence, broken only by occasional visits to check the cell or repair equipment. Every visit was an experiment, a bridge across a galaxy of fear and prejudice. Every small act, a word, a gesture, a glance, chipped away at the armor she had built around her heart. By the time the lights dimmed for night, was no longer just a prisoner. She was someone who remembered what warmth felt like, someone who had been touched by a humanity she thought she would never understand. And though she refused to admit it, the first seed of hope had planted itself in her chest, a hope that perhaps not all humans were monsters. And walking back to his quarters carried a strange weight in his chest. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't a soldier, but somehow he had begun to change a story told across stars, one small act at a time. The ship shook violently, tossing against the bulkhead. Sparks flew from a nearby control panel, and the hum of machinery warped into a chaotic screech. He stumbled toward the holding sector, heart racing. He had seen the alerts before, turbulence in hyperspace, systems overloaded, but nothing like this. Cell alarm blared. She was thrown to her knees as a surge of electricity danced across the floor. She hissed through gritted teeth, expecting pain, expecting humans to leave her here like a broken piece of furniture. But then she saw him. Ducked under the sparks, pressing a panel to reroute the current. His hands shook, and a sharp arc of electricity grazed his arm. Smoke stung his lungs, but he didn't stop. He knew she was behind the barrier, waiting, and he couldn't let her be harmed. Hold on, he shouted over the roar. I'm getting you out. Froze. For a moment she wanted to tell him to leave, to save himself, to survive as her people always taught. But something in his expression made her pause, fear and determination mixed in a way she had never seen. It was raw, human, real. The barrier flickered. Sparks crackled dangerously around its edges. Fingers flew over the controls, twisting knobs, pressing switches, muttering to himself. The smell of ozone filled the small room. Finally, with a sharp buzz, the barrier powered down and the cell's door slid open, blinked against the sudden freedom. You would risk yourself for me?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. He ignored the question, extending his hand. "Come on, this way." She hesitated. Her body was trained for war, for survival, for quick decisions. But stepping toward a human, especially one who could have let her die without a thought, felt like stepping into a storm. Still, instinct told her that this storm was different. She grasped his hand. The corridor outside the cell was chaos. Smoke curled from exposed wiring. Sparks flew from the walls like tiny fireflies gone mad. Alien intruders had boarded the ship during the turbulence, and their heavy boots echoed through the hallways. Moved fast, but instinct and panic clashed. A massive alien soldier blocked their path, its weapon raised high. Its eyes glimmered with rage, trained to kill anything human. Froze for a heartbeat, then pulled back behind a metal crate. The alien fired. The beam struck her shoulder, and she cried out sharply. Pain lanced through her body, silver blood spilling across her uniform. Felt his stomach twist. He shouted, fear and anger battling in his chest. He grabbed her, pressing her down behind the cover. "It's okay, I've got you." She shook her head, wincing. "No, you stay back, you're not trained for this." "I don't care," he yelled. "You're not going to die here." Her eyes met his, and for a fleeting second she saw a reflection of something she had never thought possible. Human courage without cruelty. Human care without selfishness. A human willing to risk everything for someone else. Swallowed back the sting of panic and pain. She had been trained to fight, to survive, but never to trust. And yet she trusted him now because no one else had shown such reckless kindness. Together they ducked, ran, and slid through the smoke-filled corridors. Sparks hissed and sizzled as they passed, but never let go of her hand. Every moment was a test, every step a gamble. Finally, they reached the edge of the chaos, the escape bay. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the room, and the smell of burning metal made her stomach turn. But for the first time in days, didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt protected. Glanced at her, brushing soot from her hair. "Almost there, just a little further," he said, voice steady despite the chaos. She nodded, gritting her teeth against the pain in her shoulder. She had survived battles, but something about this human, this one small figure standing against impossible odds for her, made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. In that moment, amid fire, smoke, and alien aggression, realized something terrifying and beautiful. Humans were not the monsters her people had taught her to fear. Some humans could be heroes, and some heroes could care. And she, injured, trembling, and alive, was learning what it meant to be saved by one. The escape bay was quiet, the smoke curling lazily toward the ceiling as collapsed onto a cold metal bench. Her shoulder throbbed, and every movement sent sharp pain across her chest. Crouched beside her, eyes scanning the room for threats, hands hovering in case danger returned. But the moment was peaceful, almost fragile, and she realized how exhausted she truly was. Her gaze fell to the small device clutched in her trembling fingers, the hollow recorder from her sister. It had survived the initial battle, barely, but the blast that struck her cell had cracked its casing. Flickers of her sister's voice escaped through damaged circuits, broken and fragmented, pressed it to her forehead and closed her eyes. Memories of home, of laughter, of a world she might never see again, surged in fragments through her mind. Pain mixed with sorrow, and for the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to cry. Noticed immediately, he reached for the device gently. "May I?" he asked softly. His hand stiffened. Humans, her species had warned, could not be trusted with personal things. They would break them, steal them, or destroy them. And yet, something in his eyes made her nod, just a little. Took the recorder carefully, examining it under the dim light. He muttered to himself, pressing panels, adjusting circuits, and delicately reconnecting tiny wires. Watched silently. Her people valued precision, strategy, and strength, but here was a human, a creature she had been taught to fear, handling her most precious memory with reverence. After a tense hour, the device blinked to life. Her sister's voice, complete and steady, filled the air. The words were simple, loving, and full of hope. His chest tightened so violently that she had to sit forward to catch her breath. You repaired it," she whispered, voice shaky. Looked up, brushing a stray streak of soot from his hair. "I just fixed it. You shouldn't have to lose what matters because of me or anyone else." Tears pricked his eyes. Her species taught her to rely on herself, to endure pain alone, to trust no one outside her ranks. And yet this human, this boy who had risked his life to save her from fire and alien guns, had just restored a piece of her soul. I don't understand you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not that complicated," said with a small smile. "I just don't leave someone behind, no matter who they are." Her heart twisted. He didn't speak of enemies, war, or victory. He spoke of care, simple care. And in that quiet metallic room, something broke inside her. The years of fear, the bitterness of captivity, the lies her people had taught her about humans. She wanted to speak, but words felt fragile. Instead, she held the recorder to her chest, feeling the warmth of it under her trembling fingers. Sat beside her, silent, giving her the space she needed. And for the first time in months, allowed herself to hope. "You're human," she said finally. And I don't think I've ever met one like you," she admitted. "One who would care." Chuckled softly, a sound that didn't belong in war-torn halls, yet somehow fit perfectly here. "I'm not like everyone else. I just notice when someone is suffering." Her gaze fell to the device again. "You've given me back a part of my family, of myself," she whispered. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" "Because being human means more than strength or weapons," he said quietly. "It means knowing what matters and acting. You mattered." Felt something swell inside her chest. Gratitude, relief, something she could not name. The truth of his words burned brighter than any warning her species had given her. And for the first time, she let herself imagine a world where humans were not monsters. A world where trust, and perhaps even friendship, was possible. Outside, the ship continued its slow hum. Inside, two beings from different worlds sat together in silence. The danger had not passed, the war was not over, but a fragile bridge had formed across fear and prejudice. And knew deep in her heart that no weapon, no soldier, no empire could take back what had given her. The proof that kindness could exist, even in the darkest times. The alarms blared across the ship, tearing through the fragile calm that had settled over it. Red lights flashed, and the metallic walls vibrated with the thrum of engines under strain. The intruders had returned, another wave of alien soldiers, faster and more ruthless than the last. Grabbed arm, helping her to her feet despite the throbbing pain in her shoulder. She winced, but didn't resist. For the first time, she realized she could rely on him, even in the middle of chaos. "We have to move," shouted over the din. Smoke drifted through the hallways, and the scent of burnt circuits made her stomach turn. His legs felt heavy, but she pushed herself forward. She had survived ambushes, plasma strikes, and boarding attacks before, but following a human who seemed terrified yet fearless felt different, strange and grounding all at once. A massive alien soldier blocked their path, its weapon raised. It was taller and broader than anything she had faced in her own army. Its eyes glimmered like molten metal, filled with instinctive fury. "Stay behind me," yelled, standing in front of her. Hesitated, this human, so small compared to the soldier, was going to confront it directly. She opened her mouth to protest, but a sudden blast from the alien's weapon sent sparks dancing along the wall, narrowly missing her head. Instinct took over. She lunged, shoving aside just as the beam struck her shoulder. Pain lanced through her, silver blood spilling over her uniform. The taste of it filled her mouth, and she stumbled forward. Caught her as she fell, pressing her against the wall. "You idiot!" he yelled, though fear sharpened his tone. "I can't lose you now." Her chest heaved with pain and surprise. Humans were supposed to be reckless, brutal, cruel. Yet here he was, shielding her, cursing, terrified, and unwavering. She had survived countless wars, but never had she felt a human fight so fiercely for someone else. "We have to run," shouted. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a side corridor. Smoke and sparks obscured vision, and the alien soldier roared in frustration, giving chase. Ran, relying on instinct and sheer will. She realized she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting alongside someone who had risked everything to save her life. Her heart raced, not just from fear, but from a strange, unfamiliar trust. They rounded a corner, ducking behind a bulkhead as the alien's weapon fired again, pressed his hands over her ears, holding her close. "Almost there. Just a few more meters," he whispered urgently. Pain and adrenaline blurred her vision. Her shoulder throbbed violently, her breathing was ragged, but she kept moving step by step. His grip was firm, grounding her in a way she had never felt before. The chaos of the ship, the alarms, the intruders, the smoke, faded behind the immediate need to survive together. Finally, they reached the escape bay. The blast doors were half open, sparks flying from damaged panels. Pushed inside, slamming the door behind them. The sound of the alien soldiers pounding against the hull echoed through the metal walls. Sank to her knees, gripping her injured shoulder, crouched beside her, brushing soot from her hair. "You're safe for now," he said, voice steady despite the panic lingering in his chest. She looked at him, chest heaving. "You saved me, why?" "Swallowed, because I couldn't let you die here. Not like that, not ever." Her throat tightened. Her people had taught her to fear humans, to see them as monsters who cared for nothing but conquest. Yet this one human, terrified, exhausted, yet brave, had risked everything for her. Something shifted in her chest. Pain, gratitude, trust, and something she didn't have a word for, all mingled together. She had survived countless battles, but this was different. For the first time, she understood that some humans could be more than their legends. They could be protectors, healers, and even heroes. And as the red lights flickered and the echoes of alien footsteps faded, realized she had to trust him completely. Because if she didn't, she would never survive, not just the battle, but the truth of what humans could be. And in that quiet, tense moment amid chaos and danger, she let herself lean on him just a little, knowing that their fight had just begun. But so had something far more powerful, the fragile spark of trust between two beings from different worlds. The storage bay was quiet except for the hiss of cooling vents and the distant alarms fatting into the hull. Leaned against the wall, her silver blood staining the floor, pain throbbing sharply through her shoulder. She had survived countless battles, but this wound burned differently, sharper, more real, because it had been inflicted while tried to save her. Knelt beside her, tearing strips from his uniform to wrap her shoulder. He moved carefully, his fingers gentle against the sensitive skin. For a moment she could only watch him, her chest tight, her instincts screaming to fight, to push him away, to distrust him. But every touch was calm, deliberate, almost reverent. "You have to hold still," he murmured. "I can manage," she said stiffly, but her voice cracked despite her effort. Her species had trained her to mask weakness, but in his presence she found it impossible. Looked up at her, eyes soft yet unwavering. "You're hurt," he said simply. "It's okay to let me help." His hands trembled as she instinctively reached for the wall, unsure how to respond. She had spent her life relying only on herself, enduring pain alone. No human had ever done anything for her without expecting something in return. She had been taught humans were predators, cold, cruel, and dangerous. And yet here he was, risking everything just to keep her alive. Finally, she gave in. She let her body sag against his hands, trembling from exhaustion and pain. Her chest heaved, and a sob escaped her lips before she could stop it. You care," she whispered, voice broken. His eyes met hers. "Of course I do. You're not a weapon or a prisoner to me. You're a person." Shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "My people, they said humans feel nothing, that your kind is a beast, that you would hurt me if it was convenient, that no human could care about someone like me." Hesitated, then gently took her hands in his, holding them firmly but carefully. "I'm human," he said quietly, voice firm. "Not an animal, and not everyone is what your people say. I care because I can, because it's right." The words struck her like a tidal wave. Years of training, fear, and prejudice clashed violently with the simple truth of his declaration. She had survived wars, betrayals, and exile, but the idea that someone could care for her freely, without reason or reward, was new, almost impossible to believe. His tears flowed harder now, not from pain, but from relief, disbelief, and something deeper, hope. She had learned to endure, to fight, to hide her heart. But here, in the quiet hum of the damaged storage bay, she realized she could trust him, truly, completely, without reservation. Her trembling hand brushed against his cheek, unsteady, almost afraid. I never thought this was possible," she whispered. His thumb gently wiped a tear from her face. "It is, and it will keep being possible, you just have to let it." For a long moment they sat together in silence. Outside, the ship was still under threat, but inside, a fragile peace had formed. The fear, the prejudice, and the pain that had defined her life for so long began to crack. The smallest warmth, the touch of a human who fought for her life and heart, had begun to heal what nothing else could. Leaned closer, forehead resting against his, and whispered, "I thought humans were monsters, but you are more than that. You are human." "And that," he said softly, "is enough. Sometimes being human is the bravest thing you can be." She closed her eyes, letting the sobs and fear slip away for the first time in years. In the touch of his hands, in the quiet care, she understood something she had never believed. Kindness could exist in the darkest of places. Trust could exist between enemies, and a single human with courage and compassion could change everything. The alarms faded, replaced by the rhythmic hum of the ship. Grip on his hands loosened, but she didn't let go completely. Somewhere deep inside, she knew that what had started as fear and captivity had transformed into something far stronger, something that could survive even the war raging outside: faith in humanity. And in that quiet, fragile moment, she whispered for herself, not him, "I am human too, and I will not forget this." The escape bay's doors groaned as reinforcements arrived. Red and blue lights flashed, bathing and in an urgent, chaotic glow. Human soldiers stormed in, weapons raised, scanning the room for threats. Smoke lingered in the air, metallic scent biting at the throat, but for the first time didn't flinch. Stood protectively in front of her, one arm wrapped loosely around her shoulders, holding her upright. She was bleeding, exhausted, and trembling, but her silver eyes burned with something fierce, a mix of defiance and relief. "She's with me," said firmly to the soldiers. "No harm will come to her." The soldiers hesitated. This was a rare moment of hesitation in their world, where orders were law. They had never seen a human risk themselves so clearly for an alien, and they could feel the truth in his voice. Studied him, heart-pounding. She had survived countless enemies, wars, and battles, but she had never seen courage like this, a human fighting not out of duty or pride, but out of care. She wanted to speak, to say the words her chest had held for hours, but all she could do was cling slightly to his arm, letting the safety of his presence wash over her. Glanced down at her. "We'll get you patched up, then we figure out what happens next." Her shoulder throbbed and fatigue threatened to overwhelm her, yet she nodded. The war outside, the prejudice and fear that had once ruled her life, they seemed smaller now. Standing beside a human who had shown her the truth, she realized something impossible. The stories her people had told her were wrong. Humans could be compassionate. They could be brave. They could save even the hearts trained to fear them. The medical officer approached, ready to help, but stopped when held up a hand. "She stays with me. Let me get her stabilized first." His chest tightened, not from fear, but from the bond forming between them. Every step had taken to protect her. Every word, every small act of kindness had rewritten her understanding of humans. And in that realization, a determination bloomed. "I will stand with you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Not as a prisoner, not as a captive, but as an ally." Blinked, surprised. "An ally?" "Yes," she said, forcing a small, weary smile. "You saved my life, and more than that, you saved me from believing I had to live alone, always fearing others. I will fight with you side by side." The commander, watching the scene, nodded slowly. "If she's under your protection, she's under ours too." Exhaled, relief and disbelief mingling in her chest. Her entire life had been built on fear, prejudice, and survival. Now, in a single moment, all of it shifted. The human she had been told to fear had shown her another truth. That compassion could exist across worlds. That courage could be gentle. That trust could survive even in chaos. Smiled faintly, brushing a stray strand of silver hair from her face. "Then let's make sure we survive this together," he said. She nodded, pain and strength mingling as she leaned on him slightly, allowing herself to feel the protection he offered. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to hide behind armor or fear. She had found someone who showed her the meaning of humanity. Not weapons, not wars, not orders, but simple acts of care and courage. As they prepared to leave the bay, walking toward the ship's main bridge, looked back at the chaos behind them. Explosions, smoke, and alarms still echoed through the corridors, but it no longer frightened her. She had survived battles before, yes, but now she had witnessed what humans could truly be. And in her heart, she made a silent vow. When she returned to her people, she would tell the truth. She would tell them that humans were not monsters, that humans could save lives, heal hearts, and inspire hope even in the darkest times. A single act of courage, a single act of kindness, had rewritten a story told across stars. And standing beside the one who had risked everything for her, finally understood what she had longed for in her lonely battles. A bridge between worlds built not on fear, but on trust, courage, and humanity. Glanced at her as the ship's engines thrummed steadily beneath their feet. "Ready?" he asked. Met his gaze, silver eyes shining with determination. "Ready," she said, and together they stepped forward, leaving the chaos behind. For the first time, she was not just surviving, she was living, and humanity, flawed, fragile, and fierce, had shown her its true face. HFY,